How do you define a Jew? Jews could no longer teach in public schools. Jews were expelled from the stock exchange. Jews can no longer be in an orchestra. Jews were not allowed anymore to go to public parks or to swim in public swimming pools. Jews were not at one time allowed to have any pets. Jews were no longer considered German citizens. They could no longer vote. All of these things didn't make much sense, and they were all done to diminish the value of Judaism. I was born in Germany in 1934, just a year after Hitler and the Nazis came to power. Many members, close and distant relatives, were not so lucky. A substantial number of immediate relatives who absolutely were murdered by the Nazis during the Holocaust. My story is very straightforward. As I said, I was born in 1934 in Germany. The Nazis came to power a year earlier. The first thing that Hitler and his Nazis did is they made a set of anti-Semitic rules, edicts. Historians say at the beginning, maybe 10 or 20% of the German people felt like Hitler. But as time went on and more anti-Jewish rules were promulgated, more and more people accepted it, like it was the thing. We now come to 1938, Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. The 9th of November, there will be spontaneous demonstrations throughout the land. The police and authorities are instructed not to interfere with these demonstrations. Second part was, very simply, it is recommended that the police arrest as many wealthy Jews as they possibly can. And it affected me and my family personally. Late in the evening, I was already in bed. There was a knock on the door on our house. A local policeman said, "You and your family and everybody has to come to the local police station," which was just down the road. And we saw a number of other Jews from our town. We were taken to the local courthouse. It was literally crammed with hundreds, maybe 1,000 Jews from the neighboring towns. And early in the morning, the verdict came. Women and children, you can go back home to town. Men are all arrested, and they will be sent to a concentration camp. The crime for which men are arrested is very simple. You're being Jewish. So my father, along all the other men who were in there, were put on a concentration camp in Buchenwald. This was 1938. Buchenwald was one of the two large concentration camps that was there in Germany. Others came much later. My parents had decided to leave Germany. My father, he had a document with him, a piece of paper, thanking him for being a soldier fighting with the German army during World War I. When he was processed again, he showed this document, and he got, call it preferential treatment, if there's such a word. And my father, along with several other veterans, were the first Jews to be released from this concentration camp. During his stay there, through the grapevine, he learned of an interesting fact. It was a Swiss entrepreneur. This gentleman had bought a large piece of land in the tropical jungles of Bolivia in South America. He wanted to introduce European dairy farming methods. What he needed really was cheap labor. The idea was this gentleman sponsored us. Now, my parents were city people. They were not farmers. My mother had never seen a cow in her life, she told me. They both applied for the family, and I have a copy of the passport which asked, what is your profession? And they said, we are farmers. We were accepted. We got all our documents in order, which was extremely difficult. It took my parents several months to get all these documents in order. And we finally were able to leave. My family and I, my sister, my mother, my father and I, were the last 4 Jews to leave town. I literally was, I think, the last person to get off the ground and into the train. Got to La Paz and got to this farm. There were no modern amenities, no electricity, no running water. For a young kid, this was an impossible situation. There was no schooling of any kind. There was no medical facility of any kind. There was no civilization. So after 1 year, my parents negotiated with the owner of the farm and we made an arrangement, and we moved to La Paz, the city itself. I got to go to first grade at about the age of 7.5. We lived in Bolivia for about 10 years, and in October of 1949, we emigrated from Bolivia and finally made the end of the trip to the United States.
People can look at the gas chamber, but it's only until you walk into its walls that you will feel that undeniable, musty, and heavy silence. The silence speaks the words that the people who entered never got to say. The silence whispers the things no one will ever see but the people who watch through the holes in the wall. The silence reminds us how we will walk out safely, but they never will.
Many people who survived the Holocaust are reluctant to talk about it. The experience was too traumatic. The Holocaust dramatically changed the life of everybody. Unfortunately, those who perished, even those who survived. My point is to tell my story to anybody who will listen. 20 years from now, Lily and I probably won't be alive. We were the youngest, among the youngest survivors of the Holocaust. It'll become history. And that's why it's so important to have it documented like you guys are doing. So it's not something that will be forgotten or become ancient memory, but you can see, you can say, here's a family, a husband and wife, who actually survived this event. Even now, they are still they're Holocaust deniers. It never happened. It did happen. And by talking about it with you, and hopefully you will spread the word, it should never happen again.